When you remove the valve on the conditioning surrounding the monogamous and religious forms of love, which is exclusivity, ownership, and romance, you begin to experience love that feels alien. This subtle shift is an awakening, and it's like experiencing a oneness. My name is Asha Sekhmet, and I am the founder of the Maji Community. We have a spiritual life system to become closer to the Creator without strict religious doctrine. And on this channel, we talk about all things spirituality, polyamory, community building, and sovereignty. And also, I am a Tantra practitioner, so we delve into intimacy as well. And I am doing a sacred union in polyamory part 2, because this is where sometimes people are trying to understand more about polyamory, rightfully so, from a perspective of how do you keep sacred unions there, right? Because the way that polyamory has been introduced into the modern Western world, right, since World War II, right? We look at, sexual exploration, and sexual freedom in different aspects, but that is not the aim of polyamory, right? The aim of polyamory is to build community. Now, I am going to be framing this in correlation to sacred union, because my background is that I do come from a Christian and biblical family. So I particularly do believe in, the oneness and understanding how men and women work together, right? And that unionship is how you become one with the Most High. With the Maji Community life system, we have something that's comparable to that in a sense of working through the opposite sex to achieve divinity. Now, we do not have a strict religious doctrine, so that's what makes us different. This means that we operate from a paradigm of non-monogamous relationships that build towards sustainable community, because we are able to understand love and intimacy from a communal consciousness. So I'm going to just be sharing a little bit more about the breakdown with sisterhood and brotherhood, and understanding that what religion and modern Western conditioning on monogamy has done is that it has oversimplified human relationships, right? A man and woman does not represent a community. However, the sacred union between man and woman is how you achieve oneness with God, but that's just working through the opposite sex. You could do that through multiple relationships with the opposite sex. And that is the spiritual framework that we utilize in the Maji community. Because ultimately, when we look at the variations of complex family dynamics and relationships that exist in our, families, we start to see that human relationships are much more complex, right? And even deeper, it really proves when we look at relationship and family dynamics today, it really proves the non-monogamous nature of human beings. It really does. The only difference is structure and information that provides the language to the roles and responsibilities to how to do this in truth, rather than, people just having these programs and, and just continuing to learn lessons through, multiple relationships over a lifetime. So really this is giving you the framework so that in the Poly Shadow Workbook, I really break this down on the aspect of understanding what is the macro level of sacred union in community building. Because what we like to do is, this is the thing. If you take away sex from polyamory, then you'll start to see the different relationship styles that exist. And it's not, that wouldn't be considered typically monogamy, right? When we're talking about community building, especially with us, when we're talking about working towards the opposite sex. Now, we do have intimacy practices that takes our human relationships to a higher level, which is Tantra, right? And we have higher sacred intimacy practices. So we're allowed to experience the supernatural parts of who we are, right? And so what some people kind of misunderstand is that when you decenter sex and polyamory, then you'll begin to start to understand the non-monogamous nature of human beings in general, that actually use relationships with the opposite sex to build sustainable community. So the framework that I am providing in the Poly Shadow Workbook is to give you the consciousness so that you understand what you're doing, so that you're able to consciously create your relationships, children, and build community with people that you trust. All of the shows that, me and my husband, have recently came across, like This Is Us and movies that's been out there, it's all about community for the future. Apocalyptic, events, and community. That's the future. So that's the reason that I'm providing this education, right? I noticed that some people have a hard time practicing polyamory when you remove the concept of sexual exploration and operating in polyamory from a functional way, because they still have spiritual and energetic imbalances within them, right? But we have to understand, again, this goes back into what I was saying in part 1 of this video, which is that when you pursue relationships based on desire individually, those are destined to fail, because that's not why relationships exist as a human. We have relationships so that we can build community. And so all I am saying is that there is a balance between men and women, in building community with the brotherhood and sisterhood. And I was recently talking to a brother about this, about the brotherhood, right? Because men and women need work, right? The sisterhood needs work. The brotherhood needs work. Men and women learning what it means to fully experience love without possession and cohesiveness and togetherness, right? With structure and seriousness, right? That doesn't have to include carnal sex. When people can shift out of that, then they begin to shift more into a communal mindset and get rid of, these spiritual and energetic imbalances that are causing disruptions in their relationships. So I was speaking to a brother recently, and we were talking about the brotherhood. He, is a Black man, and he was telling me about his experience with, going to this brotherhood event, and it was very, good. It was very good that brothers came together and connected on this. And we were just talking about how, men are naturally competitive, and we were speaking about that. And he's a brother that really takes brotherhood serious. So, checking up on his brothers and things like that. And really serious about brotherhood, even if he come in contact with sisters that, are married and, like myself, and we're community building, right? So he's like, I definitely want to connect, with your husband. We're community building. That's very serious. And then sovereignty, looking out for each other, and then vice versa for the women, right? So when I meet brothers that are husbands, I'm naturally am looking to connect, with their families, wives, and, build community, because that's what this is about. That's what community is about. So we were just talking about this, and he was saying that, it is important for men to really have that brotherhood and overcoming that competitiveness, because, you're really transcending, the parts of you, that getting to higher levels of your humanness, right? Your supernatural part of yourself, right? Which is required to practice these advanced forms of relationships that I'm speaking of. So when we were talking about this, we were just, really getting into when men overcome that, then you're really able to get that brotherhood. But he was saying that men are naturally competitive, and it's even worse when women are involved. So, and women are the same way, women can be the same way, we can all do sisterhood until, men get involved, and then it's like your enemy. and all these subliminal things, but this is a result of people that are being too selfishness in their thinking versus communal and consciousness, right? And I see this over and over 10 times fold. And so this is what the Poly Shadow Workbook is all about. I really go into depth about how to understand the interconnectedness of your sacred unions, you yourself, building community, brotherhood, sisterhood, developing the right community skills. And that has a lot to do with the shadow and ego work. So I break this down in the Poly Shadow Workbook. I have chapters that really get into details about this, have exercises for you. I have informatics for you to understand and get the breakdowns of human relationships in modern language of polyamory and non-monogamous relationships, so that you can start building your relationships consciously and you're fully aware of all the different dynamics that can exist. Because the new world is about community. Women have freedom of choice. We are free, right? And that doesn't mean that there's not spiritual laws, right? Holding relationships accountable and people accountable. But what I'm saying is that relationships are evolving. The planet is changing. We are experiencing dramatic shifts in the universe. You have to make a choice to adapt or don't. You have to adapt to the times. When you resist change and growth, then, the result of that, you're just going to be surviving instead of thriving as human beings were meant to do, right? And it all starts with this foundation right here that I'm speaking about, which is deprogramming everything that you were taught about love and relationships. When we get rid of all of that, then we really start to experience true love that is beyond exclusivity, ownership, romance. It becomes a oneness with the Most High in community building. And so in closing of this video, I really wanted to reiterate that where sacred unions correlate with polyamory is that for the Maji Community life system, the language that we use is that you work through the opposite sex to achieve divinity. One of our tenets is that you do not possess your mate. And this is how you are able to continue to evolve your soul. So when you put sacred union coupled with not possessing your mate and being able to build community and partnership with people of the opposite sex while you're still in sacred union, while you're community building, then you are ascending to higher levels of human development. You are at a higher level of health consciousness in your spirit and relationships. You are no longer ego and selfish driven. You are becoming something greater than yourself. And oftentimes we think that we've been selfless, our whole life because we've done things for blood relatives and things like that. But really, that could have really just been still ego, from a sense of, it's just so deep, from a sense of like comfort and something that really wasn't adding for helping your soul evolution and helping you find your soul tribe and community. So, when I speak about the selflessness in community building, it will feel alien. It will feel different. It will not just be blood relatives, your bloodline. Okay. It's going to be the unfamiliar. It's going to be the unknown, right? So when I'm speaking about this, I notice that sometimes people may think that they have lived a life of selflessness, but it's like you still don't understand that that's still your ego. You're not getting it yet. But I understand why, because there's a gap in education. So that's why I provided the Poly Shadow Workbook so that you can identify what your ego is. You can understand how it undermines you. You can understand how it sabotages your relationships, and then deeper understand the correlation of working through the opposite sex and building relationship and brotherhood for men, sisterhood for women, community building. There's different aspects of it, right? Developing community skills, right? Just because you were born a human does not mean that you are operating in your full humanness. Now, let me give a couple of examples and relate this to my personal life. Me and my husband practice polyamory. My husband have children with women outside of me, and he co-parents with women outside of me. And that is encouraged because I am community based. And then my husband is also a healer. He works with predominantly women in his industry, in his business, and that is encouraged and celebrated. And he used his gifts to help assist women with their preventative health, holistic wellness life, with his purpose, with women in the community. And I completely support that. And I am always ready to build sisterhood. And as you know, sisters develop relationships with him, they can receive sister wife trainings from me, and we do that in real time. All right. And there's no sense of possession or ownership, right? Sometimes these are partnerships, and then sometimes there is a deeper level of the sister wifehood trainings through my Indigenous wifehood course. Right? But again, women have freedom of choice. So we all have a choice of what our roles are in community. And I actually go into depth about this in the Poly Shadow Workbook. Okay. So the difference between, partnership or taking on that full spousal role. So there's deeper levels to that, how you can learn about that. It has a lot to do with life purpose and our different paths. So it's very important. I have that detailed in the Poly Shadow Workbook. I highly recommend reading this so that you can understand yourself deeply and understand what your life path is. So this relates to me personally too. For my life path, this was something beyond my understanding, even coming into my womanhood. I could not be with a Black man who possessed me because of my life path. In my first marriage, I only practiced husband sharing, but my husband, he did not possess me. So when I was learning my Tantra certifications and receiving Tantra and, learning, I was being taught and trained under Black men. My husband did not possess me because that was my life purpose. I had a higher calling on my life, right? So I say this to say, we have different paths. The Creator did not create any of us to possess human beings, right? But I'm just bringing this down to deeper levels to explain even of myself, even when I didn't even have the awareness of that, my soul was protected. You see, that's how serious this is. And the same thing for men and women, right? So I wanted to just talk about that. For me personally, I have always had Black men as my teachers, my healers, my saviors, my educators. That's always been my life path, right? And so no one Black man could possess me because of that, right? There's a lot that I do with sisterhood and the Indigenous wifehood blueprint, right? There's a lot that goes into that. And so I am meant to help a larger community come together. And I do that in real time. I bring couples and singles together, right? I build partnerships, right? It gets so, deep, right? This community work. But I just wanted to share that, how I see this in real time. I've seen, a couple that had been married over their lifetime, and the husband developed relationships with, other women. They could be married, some who have children by other men, and they come together, work in finance, build, group economics together. The woman is able to have, relationships in the community because she, was a healer. And so, she worked with men and women. So yeah, there's many different ways that these can take form. But see, I don't consider this in the Maji community. We're breaking down the non-monogamous nature of human beings. So we're really giving you the language and the truth behind these relationships, right? So we're just really deprogramming that. And then in the Poly Shadow Workbook, I do give more in-depth understanding of structure and how to create protocol around these things, because polyamory is just not do whatever you want. There are real spiritual laws holding us accountable, and that has a lot to do with the spiritual system that we utilize. I cannot speak for other communities. I cannot speak for other tribes. I cannot speak for people's doctrines. We practice our own spiritual life system, which was a 7-year initiation that I was initiated in into Indigenous life. So we go based on that. And then if you're able to follow that, that is a pathway for you to transcend into higher levels of yourself and oneness with God and community and working through the opposite sex. So this is how it all intertwines together with interconnectedness and community building with, polyamory and sacred unions. The Poly Shadow Workbook is available on my website, ashasekhmet.com/store. The Poly Shadow Workbook gives you the tools to build community and learn the community skills that will be necessary for this new world. There will be variations and differences amongst community, tribes, cultures, and ways of life, and that is completely okay. My purpose is just to provide the education on non-monogamous relationship structures that build towards sovereign and sustainable community and gaining towards that higher level of interdependence. Okay, so for everyone who gets the Poly Shadow Workbook, I will be having an exclusive community call Wednesday, July 22nd at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So definitely make sure that you are preparing for the times ahead, and the future is community, and community is variations of polyamorous and non-monogamous relationships. All right, make sure that you like this video, comment, put any thoughts that you have, any experiences that you've personally have been through, and subscribe to my channel. And I will see you all in the next video. If you would like to schedule a one-on-one with me, you can do so on my website, ashasekhmet.com.